For our community scan assignment, we decided to choose gentrification and inequality in Boston as the main topic of the assignment. To start off, it's best to define what gentrification is. Identifying gentrification under expert and multi-causal definitions will highlight not only the process of gentrifying neighborhoods, but the effect it can have and how it's interrelated with inequality. The expert definition of gentrification shows it as a form of urban development which causes a neighborhood or localized environment to grow rapidly. The multi-causal definition shows gentrification as a form of urban development which causes neighborhood or localized environments to grow rapidly, which has detrimental effects on local residents, displaces them out of their places of origin, with higher residential costs and a lack of control and legislation to protect them from this. The neighborhoods we chose are the South End, Roxbury, and Fenway, all neighborhoods in Boston which have been affected by the process of gentrification and have had the ability to. The initial principle of gentrification is to improve neighborhoods by specifically focusing on infrastructure, which includes not only residential buildings, but significant details like the number of restaurants, grocery stores, parks, or schools in the area. While hard to measure, quality of life entails the resources available in a neighborhood that may serve to improve one's living standard. While the majority of Boston's neighborhoods are gentrified, Roxbury, the South End, and Fenway are communities that have seen drastic amounts of gentrification more recently. To understand inequality posed by gentrification, it is crucial to notice the extent to which each neighborhood contains factors that contribute to a high quality of life and the disparities that exist in those who can use these resources. Roxbury has many grocery stores, cafes, and restaurants, which imposes a high quality of life, also seeing as it is the most gentrified neighborhood currently in Boston. There are many parks, most notably Horatio and Malcolm X Park. John D. O'Brien School of Mathematics and Science, located in Roxbury, is currently ranked the second best school in all of Boston. Many other schools in the area also rank well. In comparison to other Boston neighborhoods, a large percentage of the local population is enrolled in education, specifically high school, 16.9% being a part of these institutions. Clearly, there is a large presence of educational opportunity, but another way to measure quality of life is looking at the accessibility to public transportation and the commute time to work. In Roxbury, 13% of individuals commute over an hour to work, and 46% roughly take an hour. 54% of Roxbury households have at least one vehicle, which explains the commute time and relatively lower percentage of individuals which take public transportation as their primary option to commute. Roxbury's household demographic, showing a higher percentage of larger family households than the Boston median, explains educational opportunities and transportation. Roxbury's access to healthcare and nearby hospitals for residents is optimal for those living closer to Fenway and the South End. There does not seem to be many that exist within the neighborhood. For educational and academic resources, the South End, bordering the Back Bay area, which is known to be an area of affluence, has dispersed grocery stores, restaurants, and green space also located near Boston Medical Center. The community shows a majority of people having a bachelor's degree or higher at 65%, and many in the population have occupations under healthcare and social assistance. In comparison with the other two neighborhoods, there are less young residents in the neighborhood, mostly falling in their 30s, which could affect transportation needs. 57% of all South End households have at least one vehicle, showing a large amount of the population with their own individual transportation options. 34% of the population chooses to walk as their commuting option, and the rest take public transportation, another viable option in the area, however less common than the other two neighborhoods. The South End has many available hospitals, including Boston Medical Center and Tufts Medical Center, giving readily available healthcare access to local residents. There are less outdoor recreational areas, especially in comparison to Roxbury, but the South End is also smaller and nears the Boston Commons, a prominent public park in Boston. Public libraries also seem to be less available in comparison to the other two neighborhoods for the local population's use, but there are still options available, especially outside the immediate confines of the neighborhood. Lastly, Fenway, the neighborhood which is known for a long stretch of green space, Fenway Park, is surrounded by universities, which means for younger students there are not as many public school options. Fenway's educational attainment exceeds that of general Boston, with 74% attaining a bachelor's degree or higher. In terms of transportation needs, 33% of Fenway's households own at least one car, lower than the city average of 65%, highlighting the student demographic of the neighborhood. An extremely large percentage of the population walks their place of work, showing 49.3% of individuals using this as their option to commute. However, 14.3% of the population relies on public transportation, a readily available option in the area. While Fenway doesn't have any hospitals within its neighborhood borders, there are many options immediately outside near to make and plain. The neighborhood does not currently have any public libraries immediately available, which may be something to consider when looking at residents' ability to get access to academic resources. Displacement of individuals can be affected greatly by renters, as high real estate costs displace individuals to lower-cost areas. Having a larger owner-driven neighborhood may ensure individuals of lower socioeconomic standing that they can remain in their place of origin. The following graphs show the lack of owner-occupied properties in Roxbury, the South End, and Fenway. In Roxbury, owner-occupied housing units have only marginally risen over the past 30 years, but have stayed relatively low throughout. The same goes for Fenway, where the neighborhood did progress somewhat in the past 30 years, having more owner-occupied residences. The South End shows better results, where owner-occupied residences have increasingly become more common. However, in the past 20 years, data shows that renter-occupied housing options have dropped more than 20%, and owner-occupied places have increased by more than 30%. This is hopeful. However, generally, many Boston neighborhoods have the majority of residents as renters, which disrupts the stability that stems from owning property. Tufts University created an infographic which goes into depth on the multifaceted inequality posed by gentrification on neighborhoods, shown by disparities in household income, percentage of renters, population of individuals of color, and more. The infographic also highlighted that gentrification may not always directly cause inequality, rather create an environment that makes surrounding neighborhoods of highly gentrified areas vulnerable. This is a reality for Roxbury and the South End, being surrounded by areas of influence while simultaneously dealing with gentrification of other kinds within the boundaries of each community. As shown by a visual representation, neighborhoods in Boston, Fenway, Roxbury, and the South End have extreme household income disparities and are generally made up of lower household income populations, which means that individuals risk being run out of their neighborhoods even more so because of gentrification. Roxbury also seems to have the highest population of renters, meaning individuals are more at risk of displacement. What this infographic pointed out above all is the complicated form gentrification takes in each of these neighborhoods, which increases the threat of inequality in Boston.
Today. Laws and policies also make it difficult to fight the economic inequality in our country. Minorities are facing all of these obstacles working against them and their journeys to success. It only adds to the difficulty when people of color are being policed and incarcerated at much higher rates than their white counterparts. Police officers often choose neighborhoods to police more based on racial composition than their actual crime rates. Black people are almost 4 times as likely as white people to get arrested for drug offenses and 2.5 times as likely to be arrested for drug possession, regardless of the fact that both groups use drugs at a similar rate. In addition, Massachusetts has the most incarceration disparity in the United States between Hispanics and whites. 4.3 Hispanics are put in prison for every 1 white person. This incarceration disparity also exists between Black people and white people and is relatively high in Massachusetts compared to the rest of the country, as you can see in the map on the right.
We found that gentrification has had a significant impact on the neighborhoods of Roxbury, the South End, and Fenway regarding rising rent prices and property values. The median cost to rent a 1-bedroom apartment in Roxbury went from $1,160 in the fall of 2018 to $1,780 in the fall of 2019. A 1-bedroom apartment in the South End to rent costs a lofty $2,700, and in Fenway, the average rent price for a 1-bedroom went from $2,350 in the fall of 2018 to $2,450 in the winter of 2019. The neighborhood's original residents cannot afford these new expensive rent prices and are forced to move out and find somewhere different and cheaper to live. This is the same in property values, as the line graphs show that the median sales prices for housing properties in the South End, Fenway, and Roxbury all have had huge net increases over the last decade, with median values increasing around $250K, $140K, and $60K, respectively. As a result of gentrification, these housing market changes are vastly affecting minorities and lower income populations. These socioeconomic factors of gentrification stemming from poor policy and landlord practices are demonstrated through the case study of the Burbank Apartments located in East Fenway. In April 2011, landlords ended their rent subsidy agreement with the federal government. These had been affordable housing units for 40 years. However, landlords William and Robert Cargman were not legally obligated to continue these affordable housing units, and abruptly, a bunch of tenants lost their agreement of rent subsidization with the government because of the landlords. This move clearly affected underserved populations who relied on this affordable housing unit, like Richard Webster, who was disabled and on a fixed income and was forced to move out. However, poor policy prevented any accountability towards the landlord. Overall, this case is a clear depiction of the effects of gentrification on underserved populations.
Increasing rent prices are becoming even more difficult to pay for low-income residents, especially now due to lost jobs in the COVID-19 pandemic. However, Efforts like the Dudley Street Neighborhood Initiative utilize land trusts to create affordable housings for their community. Their plan is to develop their neighborhood without displacing their residents. They work with the local government and involve community members in their decision-making process because those who in the neighborhood have to live with the consequences of the gentrification plans. Adopting this strategy can dramatically reduce gentrification efforts because neighborhood residents will remain in mind when improving impoverished areas. Thanks for watching!